Gali, mera gali, spera gali nichta. No matter where in this wild, wacky, and sometimes wonderful world you might be, thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. We've got a special one with us, one of your favorites, and this is where we get to listen and learn, squaddies. Let's rock and roll.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Oh, not only are we a little early today, and most of you will be listening on replay, thank you for joining the show. Leave your comments in the YouTube section. And to those listening on our audio platforms on Apple and Spotify, thank you. Leave a subscribe and a review. And also, YouTube buggered up the time. So for those of you who've made it, thank you so much. And here he is, our European football expert, commentator, broadcaster, journalist. He's just a football connoisseur extraordinaire, Mr. Kevin Hatchard. Welcome back to Squad Central, mate.
Lovely to be back, as always.
Good to have you. And welcome, squaddies in the house. Make sure you listen to our Chief Like Officer at ease, everybody. Hit the like button. It costs you absolutely nothing. A few quick hellos, of course. Mohammed is here. Paul is here. Carol is here. Lone Star is here. The fam jam's joining slowly. Bill's here. Ryan's here. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I always love talking to Kevin because I learn something. Before we get stuck into the true learnings of a player that I haven't seen play too much, I wanted to get Kev's take on a couple of things. First thing is a bit of breaking news this morning, Kev. It doesn't turn out we're going to see this fella in this shirt. Alexander Isak and Liverpool, clubs may be talking. I mean, this might be too hard for Newcastle to resist. I know you comment on the Bundesliga. They've already got Wirtz, Frimpong. This would be menacing for everyone next season. What's your take?
Yeah, it really would. And it's an interesting one because Newcastle are obviously going for Ekitike. And my feeling was, and certainly what Newcastle were briefing, was that was to play in the same squad as Isak, and they weren't intending to let him go. Obviously, they've got a Champions League campaign coming up. And so I felt it wasn't necessarily either or. It could well be that Ekitike and Isak are part of the same squad. However, there are financial considerations, even though Newcastle are backed and owned by the Saudi PIF. And so I'll be really interested to see what happens. But what we do know, it appears, is that Arsenal aren't necessarily part of that Isak race, even though, Mikel Arteta is very, very keen on him as a player. And why wouldn't he be? Because he's been hugely successful as a Newcastle player.
Kev, yes, Arsenal fans have had some really good news in the last few days. And Isak is, of course, the jewel in everyone's crown. No doubt about that. But we signed a player who most Arsenal fans wanted. You and I have talked about Šeško before. And I love it, Kev. You'll correct me on the pronunciations. But Gyökeres is an incredible player, great deal. A lot of people poo-poo the league is coming from. They compare the Darwin Núñez signing, the player's desire to join the club, giving up money, the agent maybe being a bit prickly, to say the least. But Arsenal are still getting one of the best strikers in Europe. Can you talk to me a little bit about Victor?
Yeah, Gyökeres is a really interesting player because he's obviously been in England before with Coventry, and he was on Brighton's books at one stage as well. He's made the move to Portugal, and he's a winner. You look at what he's inspired them to do. He's scored buckets of goals, not just in domestic football. He's done it in the Champions League as well. And he's somebody that I think has shown his qualities. Now, I can understand why people are saying, well, hang on, is that transferable from the Primera Liga? And that's a legitimate question. But what I would say is, you look at his ball striking off either foot, you look at his ability to get into wide areas and take on defenders one-on-one, shift that ball and hit it. He does it time and time again. He's pretty strong as well. He's pacey. And he does give Arsenal something that they don't already have. He gives them something significantly different. He's willing to do work without the ball as well. And that's very, very important, as we know, for an Arteta player. So this feels to me like the kind of signing you make if you're in win now mode. Because I think if you were being more cognizant of the future, and if you were looking at the next 2, 3, 4 years, then Šeško might be the one you go for, because maybe he's got a higher ceiling. But I understand the Gyökeres move, because this is right. We're going to go for the Premier League this season. We're going to try and get as far in the Champions League as we possibly can. Let's bring in a guy who is scoring goals, and Šeško is, but is scoring goals in volume, has played in England before, has the physicality to do it. I think that's why they're making this move. So Gyökeres v Šeško is a really interesting one. My feeling is that Šeško might have a higher ceiling in the long run, but actually, if Arsenal are pushing for the title now, maybe that's what makes Gyökeres a more sensible move.
You know, last season, Kev, we talked before, excuse me, the quarterfinals of the Champions League, just as Arsenal were going into the quarterfinals. And you said something that just stuck with me. And then it was something that I kept hearing on repeat. And a couple of my guests kind of said the same thing. And I was talking to Stevie Nicol and a few others. And you said that Arsenal were the best team in Europe off the ball.
Yes.
And I thought that was a majorly huge compliment at the time. But then as the season unfolded, especially in the Champions League, I kept coming back to what you were saying, and I replayed it for the listeners and stuff. Jesus was probably the player when he first came to the club that not taught the rest of the players, but was Arteta's disciple on the pitch of, you know, how to operate without the ball. Gyökeres seems like a traditional crazy number 9 a la Haaland, maybe, as, you know, Harry Kane is maybe a little bit more kind of at his feet footballer than Haaland. But can you talk me through the way Arteta's style and Gyökeres and how he deals with those kind of components, because he's all about winning duels off the ball. What's your take on that, how he'll fit in?
Yeah, I think that's the fascination, actually, because if you look at Gyökeres, he's always looking to run in behind, or he's always looking to work those channels. He's always trying to gamble and to say to his midfielders or players close to him, I'm in an area where you can hit me. And if you can hit me early, I can square up a defender one-on-one and go past him. So I'll be really interested to see if Arteta tweaks that, if he wants Gyökeres to use that energy and that willingness in a different way. But I think certainly the efforts without the ball, I think, will fit in. I think, again, it will take a little while to get across to him exactly what Arteta wants in terms of pressing triggers, in terms of timing, all that stuff. But this guy's quick. I mean, he covers the ground really, really quickly. And that isn't just useful when you have the ball. It's useful when you don't have it, because then you can be the leader of that press. So I don't see why the natural gifts that he has can't be applicable to what Arteta wants to do. And I think, actually, if they weren't applicable, Arteta wouldn't have signed off on it anyway.
Yeah. Kev, I know, you know, you've been a fan of Kai Havertz, and on this show too, sometimes, you know, fans don't see what Kai does, and he kind of ticks all the boxes in terms of what Arteta wants, you know, whether it's the attributes, the style, you know, characteristics. Do you see a scenario where it's a settling in period for Gyökeres and Kai will start the season? How do you see that unfolding? Because Arteta, of course, is a huge fan of Havertz as well.
Yeah, and he's right to be a fan of him, because he's an incredibly intelligent footballer. He uses space really, really well. He's tougher than people give him credit for. You look at his defensive numbers, they're very, very good. You look at his foul numbers, pretty high. You know, he doesn't shy away from anything. So there's a lot to like about Havertz. And, you know, before he got the injury, the goals were flowing, and he was showing that he could play that role. And he wasn't just playing it for Arsenal, he was playing it for Germany as well. So he's a top-class footballer. And you know me, I won't have it any other way with Havertz. I won't accept that he's anything less than a top-class footballer. Gyökeres is a more traditional striker. He does offer you something a bit different. He does offer you that explosive burst and that kind of physicality. But as I say, you know, Havertz isn't an easy guy to knock over. I think sometimes with him, because he's got that kind of languid, kind of hangdog look at times, people kind of dismiss him a little bit. But actually, you know, he's worked really hard on the physical aspects. So I think it's a nice problem to have. And this actually is the key to the whole thing. Because what was the thing that undid Arsenal really last season? It was injuries. That's the truth of it. You know, Saka was out for a big chunk. Ødegaard had a big chunk out. You lose those players, Gabriel towards the end, you know, you lose those players. You have to have quality to bring in to replace them. And if you don't, you're going to really suffer. And it also allows you to rotate more. It allows you to kind of ease your way through that season. And people talked about Liverpool being lucky with injuries. I don't necessarily see it that way. I'm not blaming Arsenal or Arteta or anything like that. But I think Liverpool were able, even though they played a similar 11 for a lot in the opening months, and maybe there's an element of fortune there, I did think they tiptoed their way through the season pretty well. So ultimately, that's what you need. And this is, again, it goes back to what we were just talking about with Isak and Ekitike. The assumption is, and people might be right, but they might be wrong. The assumption is, oh, Ekitike is going to Newcastle, we think. Might not happen, but we think. That means Isak's gone. Does it? Because if you're playing in the Champions League and you're pushing for top four, as Newcastle will, and you want to go deep in the domestic competitions, you have to have a really strong squad. And that's got to be the benchmark for Arsenal.
Yeah, I totally agree, Kev. I mean, when you lose, you know, you lost Saka, Calafiori, we haven't even seen the best of. In a way, that was a blessing because we saw the emergence of Miles, you know, Lewis Skelly. It was, you know, difficult to lose like those players. Fundamentally, our front three were gone, right? And we weren't prepared. Our preparedness was poor in the transfer market, and it seems like hopefully we're learning lessons. I actually think in January Arsenal wanted to wait for Berta to come in. You and I spoke about Berta as well, and he seems to be cooking, Kev. A little bit, one more on Gyökeres before I ask you about Berta is, does he elevate us and make us, you know, title winners?
I mean, you look at the other teams and they are tooling up as well. I mean, you mentioned right at the top what Liverpool have done, bringing in Florian Wirtz, and I think he's a sensational footballer. I think that's a real statement signing, and Liverpool are moving from a position of strength. But look, Arsenal aren't that far away. Liverpool had an extraordinary season, and in the end, Arsenal couldn't live with them. And Arsenal did really push for that Champions League and gave PSG a real scare, and obviously knocked out Real Madrid, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. But that squad depth was missing. It certainly puts them in the conversation. You know, there's an argument to say that they should have won the league by now in this spell, but City can do that to you, as we know. And then last season, Liverpool just had an amazing start, built up a lead, and sometimes it can be really hard once that happens to reel a team in. So, yes, I think the key to this is if Arsenal keep making the kind of signings they're making, then yes, they are absolutely part of that conversation.
Yeah, agree. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the new signings. I always love learning from you. As much as I've seen Zubimendi play, and he's definitely the player that most of us know more about, the Euros, I think, is where people were super impressed when he stepped in, when, you know, the best player in the world was injured. And then you look at Zubi's numbers, Kev, and, you know, how he compares in terms of breaking passes. You see he's fourth there. I know that Real Sociedad did not have a good season and it wasn't, you know, the best, but these kind of heat maps, courtesy of Opta, Martin Zubimendi and his forward passing. You've got Martin Zubimendi's heat map here in terms of open play touches, of course, the orange being the hottest guys. And then you've got the heat map here of the Arsenal midfield from last season, Odegaard and Declan Rice and Mikel Merino and Thomas Partey. There are some Arsenal fans that are still not convinced by this signing. Talk to us about Zubi.
Well, look, I think what you're getting is an incredibly good passer of the ball, and those statistics and pass maps show you that. Somebody who can shape a game with those passes, can open up space for others. He was a big part of what Real Sociedad did. Now, you're right, last season was not a good one, but this is a team that was able to win silverware. They were able to win the Copa del Rey. That was a big achievement. They were able to qualify for major European competitions. And, you know, they won at Old Trafford, you know, in Imanol Alguacil's tenure. And Zubimendi, of course, is a big part of what they've done in recent seasons. That Spain final, I think, is really instructive against England because he was able to step into a high-pressure situation and really deliver. So that's the first thing. He can affect a game with that calm, with that poise, with that ability to break the lines. And if you look at what he does without the ball, there's a question mark in terms of the physicality of the Premier League and the pace of the Premier League. Is he going to be able to do the same thing in that league? And we'll only know a couple of months in. But you look at his numbers in terms of tackles, in terms of interceptions, you know, stopping attacks and getting teams moving. They're very, very good. They're very good. So what we're talking about here, we're talking about an international player who's won a major trophy, who was a big part of winning that major trophy right at the end. Somebody who's got European experience, somebody who you look at the clubs that he's been linked with. I mean, Real Madrid, I think if this hadn't already been set up, he's exactly the kind of player Xabi Alonso would have wanted. Absolutely he is. I think if Martin Zubimendi was on the open market right now and Arsenal hadn't already done the deal, I think he'd be going to Real Madrid because Xabi Alonso has been very, very complimentary about him. They obviously have a very strong link, both Basque. Xabi Alonso used to coach at Real Sociedad in the youth team there. And he has always been very complimentary about him. And Zubimendi, I think, uses Xabi Alonso as a reference for his game as well. You know, if people want to think of what type of player he might be. So I think the fact that Real Madrid would have loved to have signed him this summer, I think the fact that Liverpool wanted to sign him last summer, and I'm led to believe that was super close to getting done, and Zubimendi changed his mind, you know, very late in the piece. That's fine. That's his prerogative, and that happens. And in the end, it worked out for everyone because Liverpool obviously then put Ryan Gravenberch in that position, and he's worked out brilliant. And it's worked out for Arsenal because they get a quality player a year later. So you only have to look at the clubs that wanted him to tell you that this is a signing I think that people should be excited about.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see him play and, you know, elevate our midfield, our ball possession, our, you know, breaking the lines. He's a player that I can't wait to see playing. The physicality part of it, you know, I know there are some fans that are worried about that, but also he might be the type of player that, you know, talent-wise, he'll start off fast and maybe physically he'll just grow into the league, Kev, as it goes.
And he's smart, you know, he's smart enough to be able to deal with that change of pace, to deal with that change of physicality, because he can beat you with the ball, and he does that time and time again. I think the other thing to bear in mind really is what does this do for Declan Rice? Because if you've got a guy that can hold the fort and kind of play in that deep sitting position, Declan Rice can get moving. And if you've got somebody who could carry the ball as well as he can, and he knows that Zubimendi's minding the shop, that just gives them a really nice balance, I think, in midfield. And I think that's really, really important because, you know, you look at some of the damage that Declan Rice was able to do to teams in the Champions League. I mean, if you remember from that first leg against PSG, I think the best chances maybe came from his bursts forward. I think one of the saves that Donnarumma made came from a Rice break, and he slipped it maybe to Martinelli, I think. And Donnarumma makes a brilliant save, but that comes because there's a charge from midfield from Declan Rice, and that's how you can try and get the best of Rice, but also against these top midfields. It's not easy to make to break through them. But if you've got a really good ball carrier like Rice and a really good line breaking passer like Zubimendi, just gives you a lot of options.
Yeah. Do you think we'll see the Declan Rice against Real Madrid more with Zubi in the team?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, because those runs down that inside left channel, as I recall, caused them all kinds of problems. They never really dealt with them. I know all of the headlines were taken by the 2 free kicks, and of course they should be. But he had a lot of runs that really upset Real Madrid. They just couldn't track him, just couldn't stop him. So yeah, if you've got Zubimendi there, that really helps.
We're talking to Kevin Hatchard, people. Hit the like button. This is good stuff. And I hope you guys are also enjoying listening to this on our audio platforms as well. Make sure you leave a review and give us a subscribe as well. Okay, so Kev, a player that I haven't seen play too much, but a player that, I don't know if it reminds me of the hype of Saliba. I'm not sure if it's at that level, and you'll help me understand. For such a young player, and he's played the most minutes of the top 5 leagues under 21 in Europe, is Christian Mosquera. You look at his numbers facing dribbles. He's at the tippy top of the list, and then you look at his appearances as well for such a young player. What are we getting in Mosquera, and is he going to be kind of like if Saliba does end up one day going to Real Madrid? Is he the future? Who of the two? Talk to us a little bit about Mosquera.
Well, look, I think that's probably the plan. And he's the kind of guy that you could bring in and he'll learn from those guys. He'll learn from Gabriel. He'll learn from Saliba, who are 2 of the best centre-backs on the planet. And, you know, many people would argue the best partnership that there is in Europe. So if you can't learn from them, who are you going to learn from? And you're absolutely right to point out the numbers that you have, because let's not forget, this was not an easy season for Valencia. They didn't just cruise through the season. This is a massive football club that nearly went down. And if they'd have gone down, the financial ramifications of that would have been enormous. And so this is a guy who's dealing with pressure week to week and came through it. And you know, Carlos Corberán went there, who did work in England with a couple of clubs, as we know. But that was his hometown gig, Corberán. And a lot of coaches come in and make changes and blah, blah, blah. But he stuck with Mosquera and he kept on playing. And I think, is he perfect? No. The defensive side of it, in terms of, as you say, stopping players one-on-one, good in the air, all of these defensive basics are very, very important. There are areas to improve. His passing is fine, but I think a bit hit and miss sometimes when he's bringing the ball out from the back. That's something I'm sure they'll improve upon. But he wants to play out. He's not scared of it. He wants to play out. He just doesn't always do it as effectively as he could do. But I'm sure that will come. I'd rather have a defender who does all of those defensive basics well, like a William Pacho, for example, and then work on the rest of it, than a guy that's brilliant on the ball, but he can't defend. So I think all of that will come. For a young player, to get him for the kind of price they're going to, because he's only got a year left on his deal, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, he does seem to be a bit of a bargain considering you know, what the market looks like these days. And Kev, can I ask you this one? And for those who are listening on audio, I'm showing some images of Mosquera's, I was showing some of his progressive passing, and Kev was just talking about that. Almost 300 of you in live chat hit the like button as well. This from Opta as well, in terms of the positions that he's played, and at 48%, he's playing in that right role more so. But he seems to have the Arteta hybrid versatility chip. But can you talk me through a little bit about his positional play and where he does fit best? And if there were injuries, where could he cover?
Well, I think that's the beauty of it, really, because he's quite happy moving into that right back space. He's played as a right back at times. He can cover either centre back position. I think that's the beauty of him, really, that he isn't scared of moving into those wider areas. He can cover both positions, and that's what Arteta has always been attracted to, right? Players who can cover multiple positions. Calafiori's a great example of that. Obviously, we see Lewis Skelly, who became an excellent left back, but grew up as a midfielder, and you see him with those midfield abilities, not just when he inverts, but I find Lewis Skelly phenomenal at shielding the ball. Nobody wins a free kick like him. I mean, it's an amazing quality to have. So, yeah, I think even if Mosquera gets himself into areas where he's in a little bit of trouble, he's got the pace to get out of it. And I think that's important. So he's athletic, he's quick, he's good in the air. There's a lot to like. So you're getting him fairly early in the journey, and I think that's a really good thing. And he's been recognised at youth level. And I think we could see it international for years to come. But it's just about that learning process and about easing him in gently, I think.
Yeah. Could you see a scenario? I mean, a player, again, he's coming from Spain. People talk about physicality, but he's built differently to Zubimendi. Being able to rest Saliba and Gabriel early in cup games, League Cup, FA Cup, and competitions like that. Can you see that being a learning ground for him with Mikel? Will they take those? He's not a risk? People talk about him being able to start right away because he's played so many games already.
I don't think he's a risk. And he's durable. And that's really important because what have we seen with Arsenal in recent seasons? We've seen that Saliba injury that killed them when they were battling away with City and had that lead. And Rob Holding, is a fine player, but it's too big a drop-off, right? So what you need that kind of, it's not going to be that Gabriel Saliba competition at this stage, but it's cover. And I think it's important cover. And I think I'd be really interested to see what happens with Kivior, because I thought Kivior did fine.
He was great when he had to.
I thought he did fine. I thought considering he's not been the first team player he hoped to be on a regular basis, I thought he did fine. I thought he stepped in well. So Calafiori's obviously in the building as well. So I'd be really interested to see what happens with Kivior. But I think Mosquera is somebody that could step in and cover, and he has that durability to play a fair few games if they need him to.
Yeah. What's your take on Berta so far, Kev?
Yeah, I mean, as we said before, he gets things done. And, that's really stuck out to me, actually, that a lot of clubs wait until later in the market. And I understand why, because you'll get better deals, you'll get better prices. But like Liverpool, Arsenal feel like a club that actually wants to get this done, wants to get their major signings over the line. He's happy to pay a little bit more if they need to. I mean, we could talk about the Madueke thing as well, because I find that fascinating.
I was going to ask you, there were two more I was going to try and squeeze in before you have to go to karate, and that was Madueke and...
My son's going to karate, not me. I hasten to add.
I was going to ask you about him and Rodrigo real quick as well, but talk to me about Madueke, because Arsenal fans lost their minds. We've talked about it on the show. It's kind of been appalling in some ways, but what's your take?
I don't understand the reaction, personally. Because what you need is somebody that can really step in. I wonder if a little bit is tied in with fears about Waneri, right? because what you don't want to do is block off a position in those front areas. And I know Winery can play several positions, right? So I wonder if there's a bit of fear of, are we blocking him off? But what you get with Madueke, I think, is you get a player that carries the ball incredibly well, plays on that right-hand side, but can play on that left-hand side as well. And somebody that can just lighten the load a bit for Saka, because you can't keep driving Bukayo Saka into the ground. He's too important to do that. And I think, is Madueke as good as Saka? No. But could he develop into something, quite special? Yeah, maybe. And I think if Arsenal fans give him a chance to do that, I think he can. I think he can do something. And look, he's an England international. They don't come cheap. They don't. So,
and that's what a lot of fans have a beef with. It's like Wesbird saying, it's the fee, not the player, Kevin. And then Mohammed is also talking about the Chelsea link. Yeah.
You're not going to pick him up for 20 million. And, brought in Raheem Sterling, and he wasn't a great example of it. But, I mean, I just think it's what a ruthless club would do, in the sense that they don't care about the Chelsea link, because it's not about that. It's about what he can do for your football club. So I get it. And, that tribalism is what we love about football, and that's all a big part of it, but it doesn't really matter. So is it a risk? Yes. But I think, I look at them bringing in Jamie Gittins and get rid of Madueke, and I think, okay, but I think Madueke's got more. He's obviously got more Premier League experience, but he's got more experience, full stop. And he's still young enough for Arteta to teach him what's required. Behaviour-wise, attitude-wise, it'll be interesting to see how he does, because obviously in any club there are murmurs about stuff, and he's had a few negative things attached to him. We'll find out in the fullness of time if that's fair or not. I don't know if it is. But I think there's something there. I think he's always a player that he's not consistent, but things happen when he's around. And I'm not as baffled by it as some seem to be. And, wingers at that level who can do what he does, then they're not easy to get.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And if, Arteta has non-negotiables, players don't get away with stuff at Arsenal that they would at Chelsea. And if, hopefully he'll grab the opportunity and he'll be under a manager that takes a lot of consideration, not only on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. Real quick, Kev, before you go, Rodrigo, you were covering the Club World Cup. I mean, talk about Alonso liking Zubimendi, who's not even his player, but Rodrigo, who's struggled to find a place in this Real Madrid team. And even after they got, battered against PSG, where do you see the Rodrigo train ending?
It looks as though he'll go, which I would characterize as a phenomenal opportunity for someone. Because I think he's an amazing player. I think he's a stone cold killer. He comes into games. He is ice cool. He affects them. He's been doing it since he was young. He's got so much experience for a guy of his age. At the highest level, he delivers time and time again. Scores spectacular goals, scores simple goals. I kind of find it amazing that you can have a situation where a coach thinks he's surplus to requirements, but then not every coach has got Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. available to him. And Rodrigo's at the stage now where he can't be a squad player. He can't be a bit part player. He's kind of got to be a main man for somebody. With Arsenal, where would he fit? That would be my only question. If they're making the Gyökeres signing, if Madueke's coming in, does that feel like a club that thinks it'll get Rodrigo? I mean, he is variable. He can play off the left. He can play, off the right, and he can play a little bit withdrawn as well. That's one of the things I like about him. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm fascinated to see if somebody grasps the nettle and goes for him early in the window, early-ish, or whether everybody's waiting to see how it plays out and thinks they might get a bit of a bargain. But I think he's a world-class player. I honestly couldn't be more of a fan of his. I think he's phenomenal.
To me, he seems like for us would be like an on your feet Alexis Sanchez type signing. It looks like we've got interest in Eze, and there are a lot of fans that rate Eze, of course, real highly, elite player, had an amazing season, Kev, and comes with the Premier League experience. That's the one thing that, you know, folks are worried about. If you were the director of football, Mikel, would you be signing Rodrigo or Eze?
Oh, Rodrigo, 100%. But they're different. They are different players. They're not. I see Rodrigo as more as somebody for the forward line rather than bringing the ball from deeper, which Eze likes to do sometimes. Eze, I think, is really interesting. I think I'm fascinated to see what happens to him if he goes to a more prominent club, because I think he likes being the main man, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of players thrive like that, but I think he likes being the main man. I think he's a little bit indulged is the wrong word, because that makes out that he's not 100% at it, and that's not fair. That he absolutely is. But I just wonder, with somebody who's so prescriptive like Arteta, who has such a key thing in his mind about what he wants from players, I don't know if Eze has quite that fit for Arteta. But Arteta will obviously look at him and make that decision himself. But I see them as very different, Rodrigo and Eze, I think. I think I see Rodrigo as somebody either to play in one of those wider roles or maybe as that kind of false nine. But yeah, I think if you're asking me who's the better player out of Rodrigo and Eze, Rodrigo, hands down.
Yeah,
for me.
I think money-wise, fans are like, I'd rather have Eze than Rodrigo, or Rodrigo versus, you know, when you see Liverpool making the signings that they're making too, you want players to take you to that next step, Kev, and win a title. And for me, Rodrigo I like them both. I mean, if we end up with Eze, I mean, I think it's been a great window for the Arsenal, you know, considering. And yeah. I mean, Kepa in goal as well. Norgard.
I like Norgard, by the way. I think that's a really smart signing. I think that's one of those that people look at and go, oh. But actually, when you watch him play, he's top. He's a really solid performer. I think if you look at how highly Thomas Frank rates him, that tells you a lot, because I really respect Thomas Frank's opinion on players, and he's worked with him at 3 different places now. So that tells you a lot. I think that's, again, a smart piece of business from Arsenal.
Brilliant. You're a smart piece of business, Mr. Hatchard. What have you got coming up that the listeners could check out? Of course, please go follow Kevin at Kevin Hatchard. Will we be hearing your dulcet tones on Bundesliga commentary this season as well?
Well, yes, I'll be back on the world feeds forthcoming. I've been doing a lot of work on the Club World Cup for TalkSport. I've got another commentary to come from the Women's Euros for them, so I'm really excited about that. And I've been writing a lot for Betfair, betting.betfair.com. I've been doing previews of every single Women's Euros match. So I've really enjoyed that. It's been a really exciting tournament already, and I think the quarterfinals are going to be top. I think, and obviously Arsenal have been superb in the Champions League, and Arsenal got a fair few representatives at the Euros as well. So, really exciting tournament that I've been privileged to work on.
Brilliant. Well, Kev, thanks so much again for your time. The squaddies absolutely love you. You come with the best knowledge, and we look forward to talking to you again during the season. And they want a Q&A next time. So next time I'm going to let them ask all the questions, okay? All right.
Deal.
So I'm going to let you go and do some housekeeping, and enjoy the rest of your summer, mate, and I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, man. That's Kevin Hatchard, everyone. Please go give him a follow. Absolutely brilliant. He's so good, isn't he? He was dropping knowledge on Zubimendi on our Player Files episode here, talking about elevating the Arsenal. Zubimendi, where he stands kind of in that class factor and these X factors, and, you know, Mosquera, then, you know, comparing him to Saliba, I asked him that question as well. Bargain. and interesting to hear him talk about the non kind of La Liga players. I liked what he had to say about Madueke. Interesting what he had to say about Eze. And of course, going back to La Liga, fascinating to hear his take on Rodrigo. That's someone who knows, European football. Gyökeres as well. Very interesting. His take on Gyökeres versus the whole Sesko thing, but clearly thinks that the Gyökeres signing is a win now, which many of us do as well. I'm going to ask you, and by the way, sorry, you guys, the episode was supposed to be today, but for some reason, YouTube, I don't think it was human error, but it changed it. And some of you may have been waiting in chat yesterday, and I do apologize for that. But I think it was worth the wait completely. And to all the OGs in the house, thank you to everyone who's been listening on Apple and Spotify as well. And yes, Tammy Steele's our Chief Like Officer. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers on YouTube. Really proud about that. And thank you so much to everyone and who's been given the show a chance, and to all the new listeners as well. Right. Next time I'm going to get the time right. Look out for it, everyone. There'll be another show coming up on Thursday. I'm taking the day off tomorrow because it's Tony's birthday, and I'm going to have a little Tony birthday party with Vinny and Vespa. Yes, going to enjoy midweek chill, and then I'll be back on Thursday, and some great guests coming up, and hopefully some really exciting news coming up again soon too. So until then, thank you for listening. Please share this episode. I think it's important for Arsenal fans to listen to the layered conversations about the players. And look, I don't sit here to act like I know about Mosquera. I just learned a lot from Kev about Mosquera, and even Zubimendi as well. And I think, one of the beauties about our show is that we bring in these experts, and listening to them and educating ourselves a little bit before we start criticizing why we're buying certain players is really important. Even as a bigger signing as Gyökeres is, we can still learn something too. So thanks everyone for listening. Appreciate you. Have a great day. Be safe out there. Don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. And at ease, squaddies, at ease.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Love you guys.